Would you like to see how to get your boring shot from looking like this to looking like that? Stay tuned. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kamil Kuźmiak, and in today's episode we're gonna test a film emulation plugin for Final Cut Pro called Dehancer. So the Dehancer plugin is currently available on the most major video editing platforms like Final Cut Pro, Adobe After Effects, Adobe Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, and today we're gonna focus on testing the software on Final Cut Pro. You can go to the link below and you can download the 2 weeks trial version and test it with me. So the big advantage of Dehancer is that it's not applying a repetitive overlay of grain over your footage. It's recreating the image using the grain, and also it's adding a lot of cool effects such as halation, blooming, gate weave, film breath, and thanks to all of that you get this more organic and realistic film simulation. It also gives you tons of customization options, so you can have a full control over the final results and you can tweak everything to perfection. The cool thing is that the actual creator of the software, Paweł Kosenko, he had like a 30 years experience with working on the film stock, so he made sure that the simulation is as realistic as possible, but on the other hand, he left a lot of room for experimentations, so you can get a very realistic simulation, or you can go and create something more surreal. Okay, and just a little disclaimer, this is not a paid review, I'm not getting any money from it. The Dehancer has no saying in my final verdict, you're gonna get 100% honest opinion about the software. However, there is a discount code, so make sure to watch the video carefully, because at some point I'm gonna give you the code and you're gonna get some nice discount for it. Okay guys, enough chatting now, let's open the computer and let's get straight to testing. I selected some batch of footage to test the plugin on, and I was trying to get a nice diverse batch of footage from different cameras and from different projects as well. I wanted to have like different light conditions, different sceneries, and also I was trying to go for some clips that are quite cinematic. I think that will go well with the film simulation effect. So the first batch of videos comes from the Sony a7S III, and that's like 4K, 120 frames per second, 10-bit footage, so the higher tier footage. And then we have some 8-bit footage from Sony a6500, also 4K. Some of them is 1080, 120 frames per second. And then at the end I have some clips from iPhone 13 Pro as well, because I was thinking it's a good idea to test the plugin on the iPhone footage as well, because the problem with iPhone footage is that the footage from iPhone is very like over sharpened, and the detail, it's not very pleasing. The skin doesn't look the best on iPhone because the entire image of iPhone is very over sharpened. If you use film grain effect, film simulation on iPhone footage, it softens that detail a little bit. Instead of looking like this over sharpened digital image, it starts looking a little bit more like old holiday video made with like a Super 8mm camera or something like that. It gives it a little bit of more pleasing to the eye, softer look. It's a raw footage, and we're gonna have to do some basic color correction before we start applying the Dehancer tool. We're not gonna judge the performance of the software because my computer is not the latest and greatest, to be honest. It's 2015 Retina MacBook Pro 15-inch. It's not like M1 Apple Silicon or M2 MacBook Pro, so it would be very unfair to judge the performance of this software based on my machine. In order to optimize the process, we're gonna use the proxy files. Proxy files are lower resolution replacement of the original footage that you use to have better playback, and then when you render the actual video, you change the view from ProRes to original files. And also the last clips on the timeline are 2 clips from the drone, DJI Mini 2, because just like the iPhone footage, the drone footage comes from a very small sensor, so it's also a little bit over sharpened with like a heavily compressed details. So I was thinking to check if that more softer, lower contrast film simulation look gonna help us to make it look more pleasing, more organic, just like old picture taken with analog camera. Okay, so when you use the Dehancer plugin, you need to remember that it works on the SDR footage, standard dynamic range footage. So if you have any flat color profiles, any HDR video, you need to convert the image to like standard Rec 709 contrasted picture. You can use conversion LUTs that convert S-Log to example Rec 709, you can manually color grade the image. If it's like HLG, HDR video, you can use the HDR tools to convert the video from the HDR to SDR. So I will go through each clip, I will apply the adjustment layers, and I will adjust the levels of contrasts, the highlights and the shadows and the midtones to make sure that I have a nice contrasted image. And then I will apply the Dehancer tool to give it that stylized look. So go to the effects tab and you press on all the effects and then you type Dehancer, and then you have your plugin. You can apply the plugin directly on the clips, but you can also apply it on the adjustment layer. Adjustment layer, it's not integral part of the Final Cut Pro X. I will make a separate video on how to download the adjustment layer and put it into the Final Cut Pro. Let's go to the title, let's go to adjustment layer. It's like the layer above the videos that you can apply all the effects to, and you can make sure that everything that's below adjustment layer has those effects applied. Let's apply the Dehancer Pro and let's see what are the features. When you buy the software, it comes with a nice PDF file of all of the instructions. I made some notes because I wanted to be well prepared and I wanted to know how all the functions work. We drag our Dehancer plugin on the adjustment layer. We can make it a little bit smaller. As you can see, I have no fluid playback because my computer is too slow. Now I will show you how to create the proxy files to optimize that a little bit. So when you import your footage to Final Cut Pro, you go to File, you go to Import Media. You have this import window. You highlight the folder with all the footage you want to import. You have two options, copy to library and leave it in place. I have my library on the external SSD and I have all the footage on the external HDD drive. I prefer to leave the files in place, especially if you have a small hard drive and you use external drive to keep your footage and you create your library on the internal hard drive. You don't want to copy the footage into the library because it will be stored on the limited space on your MacBook and it can quickly fill up the space. And then here at the bottom you have the options for the proxy files. I usually go with the ProRes proxy because it's lighter for the computer to process, and I go with the 1080p resolution to even improve that optimization. So if you're gonna press import selected, you're gonna start the process of importing the files, and here you're gonna have the process of proxy files being rendered. And when that's finished, you can go to your preview window, and here in the view tab you can choose between optimize original, proxy preferred and proxy only. If you go to proxy only, you can only see the proxy files and you have a smoother playback now. However, the Dehancer is such a heavy software that even with the proxy enabled, I don't get like a fully smooth playback. It's a little bit choppy, but I'm sure that on the newest machines like M1, M2 MacBook Pro or iMac or Mac Mini, it's gonna be much better. If you use the proxy preferred, it will use original files for the footage that doesn't have proxy rendered, and it will use proxy file only for the footage that has proxy files rendered. And if you press optimized original, then you have the real view of your footage. So basically, if you go to your inspector, we have our Dehancer Pro tab here. You press show, and as you can see, there is a vast amount of option to customize. So I will explain briefly what each option does. So first you have a source tab. It's a tab that lets you to apply basic color corrections to your footage. To be honest, I prefer to do all that conversion from flat to contrasted profile with the regular tools of Final Cut, because Final Cut tools gonna be better optimized. So we're gonna leave that to Rec 709. But if you would like to convert your footage, you can go to choose your camera and you have Sony, and then you can go, for example, Sony a7S III, and then you can choose which picture profile was used. But as you can see, you only have HLG and you have S-Log3. As you can see, there is no Cine 4, there is no S-Log2. I prefer to edit manually because I didn't even shoot in S-Log3 when you're gonna be using Dehancer in your effects tab. According to the instruction manual, Dehancer should be at the bottom of all of the effects. Let's say I want to apply some basic S-curve, I need to make sure that the dehancer is actually underneath the curves. In the manual they say you can have different effects applied underneath the Dehancer Pro, but only the effects that are not related to contrast and color, something like sharpen. Sometimes it's better to render the entire video with all of that heavy processing, like basic color correction, noise reduction, sharpening and all that, render it to ProRes, and then put the ProRes back into Final Cut, like the entire rendered file, and then apply the Dehancer Pro to add that stylized filmic look. That's like a good optimization, especially if you are working on the older machine, just like I'm working today. You have a little bit of the fringing and the fringing radius if you want to remove some chromatic aberrations. And here you have all the simulated film stocks to choose from. You have Kodak, Fujifilm, Agfa, Orvo, Polaroid, there is Rolei, there is all sorts of different brands. So I think it would be a little bit nicer if they would separate it. So you have one list with all the color films and one list with all the black and white films. But this is just my opinion. Push and pull option is controlling the contrast of the image and the clipping of the shadows and the highlights. In each section you have the check mark, so you can turn the effects on and off. The film compression is the effect that is responsible for like the roll-off of the highlights and the shadows. Digital image has that more harsh clipping points when you start losing information in the highlights and in the shadows, and film usually has more fluid clipping point. So basically the impact, it's like the degree of the compression, the white point is like a clipping threshold, and the lower you set the white point, the more contrast you get, and then the tonal range is the width of the actual tonal range that's going to be affected by this compression effect. And then color density is like the color saturation in the highlights, and expand option gives you more contrast control, very usable for the black and white film simulation. The color mode, it's an option that lets you to control every unwanted oversaturation and color shifts. Then we have the print options. When you shoot on the actual film stock, you need to develop the film so it can be viewed in the projection, or you need to print the blow-ups when you shoot the stills. So based on the film stock you use for the final projection, it's affecting the colors and the contrast of the final product. But if you switch that option to linear, it's not affecting the final result. I think that's a little bit too much for me. I just want to make this process a little bit more simple and streamlined, so I will leave that to linear. Then we have some more color correction options. Then we have the film grain, which is one of the most important effects. We can control the size of the actual grain, the amount of the grain. Then we have the film resolution. This is basically like the level of details. If you want the video to look a little bit softer, you can decrease the film resolution. Then you have the amount of grain in shadows, midtones and highlights. The negative film gonna result in a stronger grain visible in the highlights, and positive film gonna result in a little bit more subtle grain in the highlights. So remember, if you choose the negative, you need to match your print with the film stock, but if you choose positive, you can go with the linear option. And halation is like this halo around a bright part of the image. If you want to upload the video to YouTube, and I think most of us are uploading to YouTube, I would recommend to go more stronger with the effects, with the halation, with the bloom and with the grain, because if you're gonna go very subtle, the YouTube compression can completely diminish the effect and your video not gonna look stylized, it's gonna look like there is something wrong with it. Basically halation is affecting the skin tones a lot. If your source limiter is set to 0, all the small light sources gonna have halation effect. If you increase the source limiter value, you limit the effect to only bigger and bigger light sources. Then the background gain, it's limiting the effect on the brighter backgrounds. Amplify makes the effect more pronounced. Impact is basically like opacity of the effect. And the mask view is the option that will only highlight the portion of the image where the halation effect is actually applied. That helps you to control the effect a little bit better. When I'm gonna switch it on and off, you can see this little red halo around the bright parts of the image. For example, with the diffusion, you can control the spill of the effect. Basically, the strongest halation effect you can achieve when the source limiter is set to the minimum, the gain is set to max, and the amplify is set to max as well. So this is like your maximum. This is how the bloom looks like. It's also like a halo effect, but it's not red, it's white, and it looks very similar to the effect you achieve with the black promised filter or promised filter. The next thing is a vignette. I think most of people that take pictures, even with the Instagram, know what vignette is. And film breath, photo emulsion on the film stock very often wasn't spread evenly, so sometimes the film was breathing a little bit. It means it was getting slightly darker and slightly lighter, slightly more saturated and slightly less saturated. But to be honest, I would stay away from it because it's very heavy on the processing power. In my opinion, it may start looking a little bit gimmicky. If that's your goal, because maybe you want to create that very retro black and white effect like silent movies, like Charlie Chaplin movies, and you want to have very contrasty black and white film stock with heavy breathing and some artifacts and very big grain, then it's like a stylized choice. If you just want to go for more subtle polished look, I think it's not worth it to put any breathing into the film. The next effect is called the gate weave. Basically, when you used to shoot film with the film camera and project the film, the actual film strip that was going from top to bottom, it was weaving a little bit to the left and to the right because of the mechanical imperfections of the camera and the mechanical imperfections of the projection. The actual film was moving a little bit moving to the side, a little bit moving back and forth. As I said before, it's exactly the same situation like with the film breath. You have the monitor options, and monitor options helps you to control any clippings, and if you switch on the false color, you have the legend on the side, so you can see everything that's red, you lose the information in the highlights, and everything that's dark violet, you are losing your shadows. And then at the very end you have the total impact, and total impact, it's like the master opacity of the entire effect. Okay guys, so I went over all of the functions of the Dehancer tool, at least briefly, and now we can grade all of the clips that I have prepared for you today. If you want to see the full effect without YouTube compression, I will paste a little download link in the video description, so you can download the test to your computer and see the uncompressed ProRes file as well. If you want to apply basic color corrections, it's good to go into the view and show video scopes. This is like the monitor that shows us the luma values of the image, the waveform. Everything that goes below 0, we lose information in the shadows. Everything that goes above 100, we are clipping the highlights, so we lose the information in the highlights. Let's apply the adjustment layer. I will spread that adjustment layer across the entire scene. We're gonna apply a little bit of an S-curve. To make the image a little bit more contrasty. Then with the color board, up the saturation a little bit. Let's see how it looks. Some of the clips are a little bit darker and a little bit lighter, so I need to separate them. So I'll cut the adjustment layer to apply my effect separately. And with the darker one, we need to slightly get the midtone slightly higher and the highlights slightly higher. I will copy that effect to the darker clips. I think white balance is a little bit too yellow, so let me add another adjustment layer at the bottom so I can adjust the white balance. So we go to modify, we go to balance color, and we go to white balance. I will measure the white balance on the candle. Yes, and I think that looks much better. Let's see how it looks overall. I'm quite happy with this correction. On top of that, we're gonna place another adjustment layer with our Dehancer tool. Okay, so let me apply another adjustment layer. Obviously, if you want to be super precise, you're gonna apply separate Dehancer settings on separate clip. We want to test it briefly on many different clips. So let's apply the Dehancer on our adjustment layer. We're gonna leave it to Rec 709. Let's choose some nice film stock. I will go through all of them to see which effect I like best. This one is quite nice, the aqua color. I don't like this one. The black and white is nice, but I don't want to make this scene black and white. This one is nice as well. I'm looking for something that I will like a lot. All of them are quite nice. Oh, Fujichrome Provia, I like this one quite a lot. It's such a tough choice. There is so many good film simulations to choose from. It's annoying that I can't like see them quickly changing. I need to do it the long way, or maybe it is possible but I just don't know how to do it. But I wish I could like quickly flip through them. Oh, that's super beautiful. But we are looking for some color stock. Now we're going through Kodak range of films. Very beautiful. Oh my god, guys, this is like browsing in the perfume shops when after 3 or 4 different scents you don't know what to choose from because you like majority of them, but then it's all mixed in your head. That one is nice. Yeah, I like this one. This one is interesting. Orvo. Orvo is like a nice vintage from 92, and I was born in the 1991, so this is very close to my birth year. The Polaroid, that's interesting. Polaroid Type 100 Sepia, the Rolei, pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, like it. Provia, and let me see that Orvo again. I think I like this one. This is very stylized. This is very interesting. Let me play with the impact a little bit to make it slightly more contrasty, the white points slightly lower to bring out the highlights a little bit. I think I like the tonal range a little bit lower. I will change the film to positive. Okay, the film grain, maybe let's make it slightly higher grain. I want the resolution to be quite high for this particular clip. And now we have the good stuff, which is the halation, which is the bloom. Let me enable the halation. Let me amplify the diffusion of the halation a little bit. So now I can see the halation here on the sword. So now let me amplify the halation to make it more prominent. Do I want more global diffusion? That's pretty cool, but I don't want such a harsh effect. Let me make it less prominent. I think I'm happy with that. Let me check the smoothness of the halation. Yeah, let's make it more smooth. Okay, so let me limit the source just a little bit, the floor of the effect. Amplify the effect a little bit more. I think that's a little bit too much. Let's make it a little bit more subtle. Let's make it like 60%. Okay, I'm happy with that. Let's see across the entire scene. Let's enable the blooming. If I increase the details and amplification, I can see exactly what I'm doing. Let's limit the source a little bit to find the nice floor for the effect, so we don't apply too much of it. I want the blooming to have very nice diffusion, to be spread out nicely. The save lights, maybe I'll put that to 98 to slightly increase that highlights. Let me just change the impact of it, because we don't want to overdo it. We just want a little bit of the blooming. I think that's enough. Let me check how it looks across different scenes. I think I need to set the details to slightly lower value. Let me put the impact to 100% to see how the details are affecting the blooming. Yeah, I think I'm more happy when I have it more in the middle. Okay, I'm quite happy with that. Across the entire scene, it looks very interesting. I don't want any vignetting. I don't want any film breathing. Let me have a look at the monitor. We have a little bit of clipping, but only in like the brightest part of the image. I think at the very end I will decrease the global impact because that's great. It's quite aggressive. I think I want to set the global impact to like 80. If you want to render the preview, all you need to do is highlight the range of the clips with Shift. All you need to do is to press Ctrl and R. And as you can see here in the corner, the preview is start rendering. Everything that's clear is the preview that's already rendered for a smooth playback. And all the gray dots shows you the area that's not rendered yet. And here at the top you have the progress of your rendering, and we can now see our effect. Yeah, I think I like it. Maybe the halation on the candles is a little bit too extreme, but on the other hand, I wanted to have that strange look of like a movie from the 80s, you know, so I think that works for me in that case. Okay, so guys, now I'm gonna do rest of the scenes and clips. We're gonna fast forward and we're gonna see the end result. Okay guys, so in summary, I really like the Dehancer plugin and I will definitely use it to spice up my music videos and to make my iPhone travel vlogs looking more organic and cinematic. And I totally recommend the plugin to anybody who want to make like retro looking music videos or maybe create some art. If you want to get that analog nostalgia in your footage, you can't go wrong with this one. The software gives you tons of customization options and it's very flexible. One of the downsides to consider is that it's definitely heavy on the computing power. However, thanks to working with proxy files, you can optimize that a little bit and you can use it even on the older machines. You won't get this perfectly battery smooth playback, but you can make it work. It's definitely not the most affordable plugin, being $399 for the full version. However, for the half of the price, for $199, you can get the Dehancer Lite, which has majority of the coolest features, such as 63 film profiles, the film grain, the defringing, the vignette, the blooming, the monitor. So for half of the price, you can get majority of the effects. Obviously, you're not gonna get the halation, you're not gonna get the film breathing, you're not gonna get the gate weaving. However, the Lite version can be more than enough for most of you, and it's only $199. And with my special code, the KK Vlog, you can have a 10% discount for it, so make sure at the checkout put the KK Vlog and get it for 10% less. I had so much fun testing the video version of the plugin, so now I would love to test the Affinity Photo version of the plugin to incorporate the analog vibes into my stills, and there is also iOS app for your iPhone that I would love to test as well, so definitely you're gonna hear more about the Dehancer in the future videos on this channel. Okay guys, that's gonna be it for today's vlog. If you had fun, don't forget to leave the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel because there is more content on the way, and see you in the next one.